Hey everybody, Mike Miller with the Herald Times, joined by IU football columnist Andy Graham. We're coming to you from Chicago at Big Ten Media Days. It's the second and final day of this annual event up here. It's Indiana's turn to go along with 6 other teams in the conference. It's been fairly quiet this offseason for Indiana, and that is a good thing when it comes to football programs in the offseason. And that, I think, was reflected in some of the news updates we got from Kevin Wilson today. Nothing necessarily major as far as roster updates or injuries are concerned. Really, I think the biggest stuff was the update given by Kevin Wilson on running back Camion Patrick. There's a lot of hype around Camion Patrick, quite possibly IU's most skilled player at that running back position. He came to IU as a receiver, tore his ACL this spring, missed the second half of spring practice, but the prognosis is good so far. He appears to be ahead of schedule. He could return to IU potentially by the beginning of Big Ten play. Their Big Ten opener is October 1st against Michigan State. Be a huge boost to not only depth but just, again, skill. He might be just one of the most powerful, well-rounded players Indiana could deploy in the conference season. Elsewhere, Isaac Griffith, a receiver who tore his ACL in last year's game at Penn State. He's had a lot of complications with his recovery and his rehab. He's going to undergo another procedure that's going to keep him out from the preseason camp over the coming month. Whether or not he actually gets to play this season, that remains to be seen. Otherwise, guys are getting healthy. Chase Dutra, Zeke Walker, who's going to be playing that hybrid safety spot this year. Dutra, obviously a steady safety for Indiana. They all appear to be full go for preseason camp. They're going to take it easy with those guys and kind of ease them back into the scheme of things. But all indications are that injury-wise, outside of Isaac Griffith's struggles rehabbing from that ACL injury, all things appear to be good right now heading in to the preseason, which begins next Wednesday in Bloomington. The only other roster update of note was a recruiting tidbit. Indiana signed 21 players in the February signing class. Only one didn't make it. 3-star safety Brandon Drayton had an academic issue, was not able to be admitted to Indiana. He has apparently found another school. Not sure if that's official yet. Judging by his Twitter picture, it appears to be Marshall, but I don't know if that's official. He's not on the roster, but he's not going to make it to IU. But that's really the news right now. So it's, again, a kind of reflection of the offseason, not a whole lot of major stuff going on. Now we're just kind of looking big picture, and each team brings 3 players to this event every year. Indiana brought 2 offensive linemen, which, talk about reflection, that's just kind of a reflection of where Indiana really is, being able to play with the big boys in Big Ten.
Yeah, in terms of the offensive line, Kevin Wilson over at Joe at Weed Street, an annual Chicago Alumni Association meeting here that they have in conjunction with the Big Ten kickoff, mentioned that Indiana has at least a dozen offensive linemen 300 pounds or more now on the roster. He attributes some of that to the new strength coach Keith Caton's methodologies. In fact, when he was aware of the increased heft, he went to Caton and said, can they run still? And it was assured that they can. In fact, he mentioned Dimitri Camiel at 320 and Dan Feeney at 310. Both still look really lean, unlike certain sports writers. By the way, I'm just honored to be in the presence of the sartorial splendor that is Mike Miller.
Stop it.
In any case, it is really. I'm for my column tomorrow. I guess sort of give a heads up about that. I mean, I'm quoting the poet Carl Sandburg. He described Chicago as the hog butcher for the world, and it's no stranger to packing beef either. And beef is kind of the staple for Big Ten football in late November and into December when you're playing in bad weather games. It's always been a case where you need to be really competitive in the trenches to be successful in this league. I think Kevin Wilson understands that. I think they're making progress in that regard. We saw some of that last year too. Indiana averaged over its last 5 games. They were really rolling on the ground. They averaged 5.1 yards a carry over the last 5 games. They went over 300 yards against Michigan, that kind of thing.
Impressive.
So if that continues, if they keep building on that, that answers a lot of questions just by itself, because really everything starts with the offensive line. The quarterback can't, and the other peripheral or perimeter skill guys on offense can't really operate if the line can't block it. It doesn't matter what the scheme is. If you can't protect your quarterback, Indiana ranked 6th nationally in fewest sacks allowed last year. If you keep getting that kind of offensive line play, That means you can line up in this league and be potentially competitive pretty much every Saturday out there. Obviously, Indiana still has big questions on defense. We don't know who the quarterback's going to be yet, and Indiana also has a kind of offense that requires at least technically adequate quarterbacking.
Yeah.
So there are still a lot of questions to be answered, but it's interesting that, talking once again with Fred Glass last night, he said, when I talked to my compatriots and even some of the other head coaches, they say, you guys are legit up front. And that, to me, goes a long way to being competitive in this particular league.
You know where Dan Feeney went to high school, right?
Yes, it's South Chicago, yeah.
Carl Sandburg.
That's right. In fact, I probably should utilize
You probably
that.
should. I was just thinking about that. You
that's
mentioned
right.
the beef.
But no, it's, you mentioned Camion too. Let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, we don't want to overhype this guy. He hasn't played it down.
Kevin Wilson's done his own good job of hyping this guy.
Well, he hasn't played it down for Indiana, okay? But everybody, just talking to folks behind the scenes, I mean, it's pretty clear. Even before the bucket game last year, we were hearing rumblings from folks like, my goodness, is this guy really potent? He's really good. Then after the bucket game up at Purdue last year, just in the course of conversing about several topics, Coach Wilson let slip that, you guys haven't even seen our best player yet. And he was alluding to Patrick. And he's just kind of doubled down on that sense. I mean, to today, we were discussing whether or not if Patrick comes back and is still maybe not quite 100%. He came in as a wideout. They've looked at him as a running back too in the spring. I was curious whether or not he might play more wideout just to avoid some of the wear and tear. Although out there with the knee situation, you have to do a lot of cutting and a lot of shifting. So it was, we just wanted to talk to Kevin about that, and he did. And then he said, well, we have a lot of backs and we have a lot of receivers. And then there was kind of a pause, and it looked like we were going to go on to the next topic. He said, but I think he's probably better than any of them.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of how he's spoken about this guy. So to me, Kevin doesn't hype players. That's not his modus operandi. So if he's saying this about this particular guy, then this guy probably could be a game changer if he comes back healthy for Indiana.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Camion, before we go too long on this, I think Camion's a great example of the kind of offensive players Kevin's really feeling comfortable introducing in that offense. He really likes as any coach would like, the versatility and the explosiveness of having guys in the backfield or lined up at receiver. Really, when you look at this Indian offense, there are a lot of guys that kind of match that profile.
Kind of hybrid.
It's Mike Majette. I mean, you have Isaac James, who was an athlete who redshirted last year. Tyler Natee, who's a running back, played quarterback in high school. He's 260 pounds. He could just be a real bruiser for you. There's some Cole Guest. I mean, Cole Guest is going to be a factor in this offense this fall, according to a lot of people who have seen him play and kind of figure his profile. Devontae Williams was a corner last year. He's kind of a little scat back guy who's coming back to the backfield.
A lot of these guys could deploy in the slot.
And we saw this in the spring a little bit too. They were experimenting with receivers lining up in the backfield, running backs learning how to play receiver, just how to run routes and feel comfortable doing those sorts of different things. So
and when you're running up tempo and you're not giving the defense a chance to sub, that means you can start creating the kind of mismatches you really want out in the flat or wherever.
So we're only halfway through this Indiana Media Day up here at the Big Ten event. We're going to be talking to players a little bit later. We'll have some more video of that. And throughout the week on HeraldTimesOnline.com, the Hoosier Scoop blog, scoop.hoosiershq.com. We'll have a ton of stories just kind of previewing the Indiana football season and all that is to come. Preseason camp opens next Wednesday. We'll be there for IU's local Media Day event. It's football season, so stick with us. Thanks, guys.
Thanks.